So I'm reading Manny, Dear Manny by Nic Stone. And I'm going to give you a whole spiel later on, but I wanted to comment on this part I just passed by and the resemblance of it. So in the course that Jared is taking, they debate certain issues and how it holds up. I think it's called constitutional law. And they were talking about a black man who was fired by a black principal because he was teaching a book written by a black man during Black History Month. And the reason why he was fired is because it wasn't in the curriculum, and two white people spoke up against it. And it's crazy how I was coming on here to talk to y'all about one thing, and I realized another situation came up, but I don't feel comfortable talking about the other situation. But there was a situation where I talked about something that had nothing tied to our curriculum, and students went and complained to the principal, and I was recommended, as in I had to go on leave. They had to investigate the conversation that was had, and thank God. What's so crazy, what I will share about that moment, I am one of those teachers that have real world discussions with my kids, but I'm learning looking back on that. I should have tied it in, because at the time we were reading The Outsiders, and even my coworkers like, you should have tied it in to the greasers and the socials. Like you should have tied that in. But I wasn't. I am that teacher that would have blunt conversations and would not suffer any recourse from it, because my kids understood where I was coming from. Well, because the people felt ousted for their beliefs, they voiced concern, voiced really rage, and it went all throughout. Like I heard it went to like a counselor. The counselor was like, it is what it is. Then they went to an assistant principal who I know had it out for me from day one, and then she immediately took it to the principal. The principal took me and basically told me, okay, you're going on administrative leave, and you may not get your job back. But immediately when she said that, God said, nah, you're good, don't worry about it. Now, did I go through growing pains being out? I didn't like being separated from my kids. Like I had kids emailing me, Ms. Jenkins, oh my gosh, when are you coming back? What happened? I heard such and such snitched on you. Like, now, if I'm in a private setting, I will share what I talked about, but I don't know if I feel comfortable putting that. Like, even with my upcoming book that will come out, if not next year, 2027, I will discuss the ramifications of those actions. I don't necessarily know if I want to discuss the actions, because to put that in print is a little disturbing for me, because when I think about what I was talking about, it is a bit much, but at the same time, it came from a good place, and that's what HR saw. But that's not the initial reason why I jumped on here to talk to y'all. I jumped on here because with some of these magnets we have in some of these schools, it is obvious you're trying to bring in a certain demographic, because the majority of the schools are black. And I'll admit, at this particular school I was at, same school, no, I didn't get in trouble in that school, that one, this is a different school. At this particular school, that particular magnet brought in more white students, let's be honest. So when I was asked to teach that particular class in that magnet, I first was resistant, not because of the demographic, because I really didn't want to move down. I was teaching 7th grade, been teaching 7th grade for years. I didn't want to move back down to 6th grade. I hadn't taught 6th grade since I started teaching. In my first couple years of teaching, I taught 6th grade. I didn't want to go back to 6th grade. And I knew the 6th graders I had when I was in Charlotte were totally built different than the ones I was going to have. But I reluctantly did it, because I really had no choice. Because the other person who was supposed to, this is a sidebar, the other person kept saying she was going to take the position. So I'm thinking I'm good. She turns around and says she didn't want to take the position. And so I'm told I have to take the position. Oh, that's a chapter. That's a chapter I just realized. All right, so things are going gravy. Things are going good. And then I finally decided that my honors kids I had, which ironically the honors kids I was teaching were in this magnet program. And again, I had a lot more white students because of that. The rest of my classes, you can count on your hand the number of white kids that were in there. That was the total opposite with these honors classes and these magnet classes. So we were teaching Fire from the Rock novel study. And for those of you not familiar, Fire from the Rock is about the Little Rock Nine. And I was pulled into the office, the principal's office, and I was asked, are you reading an Assalamu Alaikum book? What? So I said, it's about the Little Rock Nine. Okay, well, I had some parents who complained, so just be careful. And that showed me in that moment, and there was other moments too, that principal is not for the betterment of the children, you're for the betterment of the parent. So the parent feels uncomfortable, you're willing to side. Okay. So I wasn't told I couldn't read the book, but I sympathize with that principal who was fired. And I have a feeling this has happened in real life. I'm gonna do my research before I post this video, but I have a feeling this happened in real life, where the teacher was teaching something that wasn't in the curriculum. Because sadly, you do have some schools, they have their curriculum is not just standard based. It is, these are the standards and these are the texts you can read, and that's it. We have texts we're required to read, and then you can add other stuff with it. Then you have what is called suggested text. Because I'll never forget when I shared with someone about my experience at one high school I taught at, and mind you, we're in the same school district. She said, we're not required to read that. And I was like, really? Really? Oh. So, again, I do wonder, is that more of a private school situation? Or are there public schools that literally say, if you teach anything that is not on this list, it's a problem? Now, we do have what is called a recommended, or we have a novel list. And if you choose to deviate from that list, you can get in trouble, especially if it's very risque. Okay. Another story I'm about to tell you real quick. Well, let me go back to the other story. So basically what happened with the Fire from the Rock, we kept reading it. But what I did before we kept reading it, I went back to my students and I said, what is the problem? Because I'm open, very open with my kids. And one child admitted, I feel like you're calling us racist by reading this book. I said, no one's calling you racist. We're showing you how people prevailed and overcome racist actions, trying to have opportunities they weren't given before. And I said, if we have a problem, y'all can go somewhere else and I can give you another book to read. No one left the classroom. So, part of me wants to go back and interview kids who were in that class and ask them what was their reaction. And how did they feel during that moment? Like, I really want to reach out. Like, I'm actually in contact with one of those kids now. And I don't know if she'll remember it, but I wonder what her reaction was. But let me fast forward to the other situation I want to tell you about. So, because we have a novel list, especially on the middle school level, you have to be very careful when you decide to deviate from that list. Now, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go to your person who's over curriculum instruction in your school and ask them, can I read this book? And then they can take it to you can take it to your department chair, and then they will take it to curriculum person, or y'all can go to the district office and ask for proof. But that takes proper planning, where really you have to map out the year before, these are the books we want to read, then take it to overs at the district to say, yes, this is okay. Okay. Some it may not be that extreme, where you simply just go to your department head and whoever's over curriculum instruction in your school, and possibly an admin and principal, to make sure they're on board and it's approved. And if they have to go to the next level, they have to. I'll admit I wasn't that teacher. If I decided we wanted to read something, we read it and we just flowed with it. And let's be honest, admin is not really in your room that much, that if they find out that you're reading something like that they will be like, what, and shut it down. Okay. So there's a ways to get around it. But in this particular situation, I'll admit we were reading November's Blues, which honestly is not a middle school book. These were 7th graders I was reading this to. But I would read it possibly with 9th grade and up if I had to do it all over again. But I read it to them because I told them about the book, and I would allow my kids to choose novel studies based on stuff that I had read. And even though November's Blues, this was a girl who was pregnant, it doesn't go into detail about the matter, about her having sex. It's about the fact that here I was on my way to Cornell University on a full ride, and that is thrown out the window because of 15 minutes of pleasure, and her struggling with that and grappling with the fact that she's going to be a new mom. Her boyfriend is dead because of what happened in the previous book. So it's a lot of author's craft in that book, from foreshadowing to flashback, and that was my whole reason for teaching it. So I know to this day that a teacher, or she was like, not teacher, she was like in an administrative role, was in my room and saw the books stacked up on my computers. At the time I was an iTech class, which means we had computers. All the English kids had computers in the class because we weren't one-to-one yet. So she sees these books on top of the computer and goes running to my principal. They're reading these books. They shouldn't be reading these books. Now, mind you, if you didn't want us to have these books, why did we have a whole class set in the building? Yeah. So I get called in. I'm told I have to come into a meeting. Now, to this day, I don't think this former principal knows this. She decides to have a meeting with me with someone from HR. HR, before they come to the building, calls her administrative assistant and says, I really don't have to be there, but do you really want me to be there? And then the principal says, yes, I really want you to be there because I'm not. What it was, the principal was being scary and really felt like me reading this book was going to cause parents to go into a roar and protest. And really, she really didn't know her kids, and she really didn't know her parents at all. It was almost as to prove a point. So I'm in the office, because mind you, she's on speaker on the walkie-talkie. The administrative assistant is on the walkie-talkie on speaker with this person while I'm in the office waiting for you to come into the meeting. So Coach HR comes, and because of that incident I told you about at the beginning of the video about me being on administrative leave, she brings that up. And she brings up the fact that, number one, we don't teach stuff with alternative lifestyles. Basically, what she was saying is, we don't teach anything that talks about sex, that talks about anything. We should be promoting abstinence. That's what she was saying. And I wouldn't want my grandchild. And I told myself over and over again, as soon as I left that meeting, if I had the gall and the boldness about me, I would have told her, a lot of you'd be surprised what your grandson needs to hear. And secondly, a lot of these kids need to hear this. And I said, I'm not teaching this because the girl is pregnant. I'm teaching this because of foreshadowing, the author's craft. So it has nothing to do with that. But if y'all don't want me to teach the book anymore, we won't teach anymore. So that's how I left the meeting. But I was very upset because, number one, HR didn't have to be called. That could have been a conversation between me and the principal where she said, I heard you were reading such and such, which that has happened to me before. I told you about the Fire from the Rock conversation. The principal called me in the office and we had a one-on-one conversation. You didn't have to call the district office. So I remember I went back to my students and I remember one in particular. Who snitched? Who snitched? I was like, it's not about snitching. And I knew it wasn't a student. I knew it was a teacher. I knew it was her. That was very clear. And that she wasn't a teacher at the time. She was like over a certain thing she did administratively in our building. And I'm just like, really? Whatever. But you just, now, fast forward and now we're in 2025. At the end of the day, we have to be careful. I will never forget when Nic Stone, one day, this is with the Page Turner's Early Learners Organization in Atlanta. They invited Nic Stone, Angie Thomas, Tiffany D. Jackson on a panel. And Nic Stone told us, as much as we want y'all to read our books, as much as we want y'all not to have to silence yourselves, if your job is being threatened, she said, we need you. I'd rather you just do what you have to do than to lose your job. And it's crazy that people have to say that. And I'm leery, and I'm on the line with that too, because even the fact that there's a new documentary coming out, The Librarians. Look it up. American Library Association has been posting it, but they have their own social handle, The Librarians. And it's basically showing the number of librarians who have lost their jobs because they refuse to take certain books off the shelf. Books that were logically should be there, but because the extremist Christians, and I'm a Christian myself, but you have extremists who think we have to live in a Bible-toting society. Everyone who's not a Christian has to live in a Bible-toting society. No, we're supposed to live in a Bible-toting society within ourselves and our decision-making. We shouldn't be enforcing that on other people. But there are people who've been fired because you feel like that book shouldn't have been on the shelf. So it's a discussion that we definitely need to have, and we definitely need to engage in with people, because especially with this Trump, and let's be real, this was happening way before Trump. You have Moms of Liberty, who they've been infiltrating school board meetings, infiltrating probably legislation, trying to put forth their agenda. The fact that we have, I think it's called PragerU in the state of South Carolina, is beyond atrocious. So keep your eyes open, be visible. Don't be afraid to be that teacher that's going to, if you have a required curriculum, don't be afraid to speak up. And that's one thing I shared in another video where I spoke up to my colleagues at that particular high school I was at, and I said, why are we required to teach Shakespeare? It doesn't reflect the demographics of our kids. And I mentioned that on an awareness video. And I said, okay, and then when it was up, you have to and one teacher even said, I'm gonna be honest with you, you're required, but it's not like people are gonna be on your back and making sure you teach it. But I wasn't gonna be that teacher that did not teach it. But what I was gonna do was teach other things along with it to reflect our students. Because if you really analyze Shakespeare, it's really, people talk about the beauty of the language, but it talks about some really grotesque things. Like, I wonder why Christians don't try to ban Shakespeare. Really read Shakespeare. And you want your ninth grade child to read that? Yeah.